Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight King of Cards. In the last part, we continued on here in Birder Bluffs, and now we have access to effectively the entire lower half of the map, but also it's time to say hi to good old Tinker Knioght.
Who are you? Are you friend or foe?
I'm just passing through this abandoned house. Are you a ghost? I've seen so many ghosts lately.
I'm no ghost, but I am a fool. I tried to make men from brass and tin. This time I went too far. Now they have a mind of their own. I thought they would fight for me, but in the end I hide here. Are you here to take them? No, I can't let you use them. Leave now!
So the usual effects happen here in Phase 1 of Tinker Knioght. He's going to get on his mobile gear and throw his wrench at you back and forth. Towards the latter half of the health, he'll end up doing the thing from Spectre Torment where he'll get jutted up on the platform higher. You need to kind of just bounce it off the wall and then twirl onto his head to do damage from there. At the end of the day, it's base Tinker Knioght. He can throw a lot of stuff at you, but he's not a lot to be afraid of. My only real piece of advice is if you're trying to do this deathless, save as much vigor as you can during Phase 1. Because you're going to want it during Phase 2, although notably, if you do die during Phase 2, you do start at Phase 2. Surprise, surprise, the Tinker Tank shows up. Oh no, what a shock. King Knight's Tinker Tank fight is probably the hardest variant of it there is across the 4 campaigns, if only because his limited attacks and movement make actively going over to hit main Tinker Knight really annoying, considering he'll now swap between the top left and top right of the screen just like during the Spectre Knight campaign. But while Spectre Knight had his mid-air slash to stay on Tinker Knight pretty easily in this phase, King Knight has a lot of trouble keeping up with him as he moves between the left and right side of the screen every 3 or so hits. Meaning, it's very easy to just miss, fall into a pit, or get damaged and then fall to a pit from there. This is honestly a really hard fight as King Knight. Some weapons can help a little bit. The Blitz Steeds in specific can help a lot here when he's in the distance, but your Rat Bombardiers aren't going to do a lot otherwise. The Hardy Hammer can do a little bit here and there. So yeah, props to you, Tinker Knioght. You finally have a fight I consider actually hard. Because even at your hardest, which was probably in Plague of Shadows, that was largely just because the attack was really awkward to hit you with more than anything. Like with the earlier versions of this fight, he does get more attacks on the Tinker Tank the further in you get. Like the missiles will fire out more often, so will the balls you can charge into to bounce off of. But as long as you remember you can jump through the twirling spike to make it act as a platform, catching up to him gets a little bit easier from there. Just be careful when trying to approach him when he's in the distance, because it's very easy to just fall off the spike and almost into a pit like I did a moment ago. Special mention of annoyance in this fight, by the way, is the fact he still throws his wrenches at you, but when you're playing as King Knight, you're likely just trying to pogo off of him during that, so you're just going to bounce off those instead of him and lose track of where you are potentially as he slightly hovers left and right. With him defeated, though, not only do we get the usual cash reward, but now we can go play him in Joustus, and not for nothing, I do like a lot of the cards he has. If memory serves, he not only has a bunch of conveyor arrow cards, which are very useful in setups like the ones he could potentially try to do, but he has a lot of the arrow swap cards, which when paired with those can make for some interesting setups, should you get the right draw to do them, admittedly, which is the big question mark with all card games. Hi, I'm someone who played Magic the Gathering a lot in high school and played approximately 70 hours of Yu-Gi-Oh! A few years back in a row on Master Duel and has since dropped it completely because I just got tired of the daily grind there. Before we go actively duel Tinker Knioght, though, I am going to take a moment to get the next Vigor upgrade from our mother. That puts us up to a maximum of 82 remain from her. And since there's no more sub-weapons left in the game at this point, you might as well just use your medals the moment you get them, just to get your Vigor higher unless you're trying to do a challenge run of some sort.
When I left, men of tin swept through the halls of my proud home. I planned to build parts out of their scraps. But first I have time to play a match or two.
Yeah, alright. His arena also tends to have a lot of holes in it, which can actually kind of play against his conveyor arrow setups, because that means he might just accidentally move himself into a hole and remove that card from play. But there are times where that can actually be beneficial, because since a card removed from play like that gets sent back to the deck, you might get that card again when you need it from a lucky draw. So top decking in that regard can actually be pretty helpful, as unreliable as it ultimately is. Also, here's one of the instances where I literally cannot tell where I can put a card, so I just kind of mash the button until I find out where it can go. That doesn't happen very often in a playthrough in my experience, but it can happen often enough towards late game where it's kind of easy to get lost with how many arrows are pointing up, down, and sideways. Also, just to showcase, even though the shop is still here, you can still knock that guy off. He just breaks through the window. So what I'm doing right here at Mr. Hat's shop is buying the first upgrade for the glide wing itself. Now, the floor and tiles are all silver. It's, again, entirely aesthetic, and there is another upgrade that makes everything gold, but it's something I can spend my money on, although even though I usually stick with the gold one by the time I get it, I do ultimately prefer the base glide wing design, but that's mostly because you have it for longer at that point. Tub's sure looking fancy. Cooper never spared to seed money for in-flight renovations. Thanks for shelling out on the refresh, King Knight. And you even get a little line from Doe about that, although notably Cooper doesn't have any lines about that, which always kind of confused me. Also, it's a minor thing. I do like that they actually, of all things, expand on the stories of even minor background characters from the original Shovel Knight, like Cooper, because he was the airship enthusiast in the original release. Also, I think I'm safe now to say this far into the LP. Every single time I've said the Glide Wing's name in this LP, I've caught myself almost saying Gullwing, entirely because I grew up playing so much Final Fantasy. This is not Final Fantasy X-2, both thankfully and not thankfully. I do like a lot about that game, it's just that it's hard for me to go back to for a couple reasons. At this point, though, we're starting off the Propeller Knight themed stages, and while these stages I find kind of panic-inducing in the earlier 3 campaigns, they're honestly pretty safe and fun for me as King Knight. Because even the mechanics I find usually pretty annoying in a level like this that are in the other 3 campaigns are kind of downplayed a little bit here. The main focus of the first one here is the cannonballs. Use them to dash into and then twirl off of and do what you can to stay above pits. They do have these enemies here that are sort of just, I'm going to call them Monty Moles almost right out of Mario because you can only hit them when they're completely revealed from the ground. On most playthroughs, I honestly ignore them though because while they're in my way, I can get out of their way faster. Also, I don't know why. I mentioned before there's a couple places you could use the scepter, some of them we got much earlier in the game to skip some platforming. I've always remembered to do it here for some reason. I don't know why. If anything, this is one of the least trustworthy levels to do that in given the bottomless pit threat, but it's just what I've always done. Also, I can't quite tell why, but something I do find interesting about King Knight specifically is that it feels like for him, he has very little trouble dealing with enemies that Plague, Shovel, and Spectre Knight all had issues dealing with, be it these Propeller Knights in this stage, the variants of the gold armors throughout. I just think for some reason he has a much easier time dealing with them, but I can't tell if that's just because by the time I played this campaign, I was more hyper-aware of how to deal with them, or the higher amount of stages just made me feel a little more prepared for them in some regard. This stage has an alternate exit, and to reach it, we just need to jump up here and go across these cannonballs and spikes. The alternate exit route for this stage has always kind of reminded me of 2 distinctly different games. It reminds me of a part of the Skyverse stage from Mega Man X5, and even more specifically, that diagonal auto-scroller near the end of Cloudland in Mario Bros. 3. We got a diagonal auto-scroller where the platforms are the airships that the Cloud Knights or Propeller Knights themselves will actively use. Thankfully, because they're directly rectangles, you can shoulder charge into them and not have to worry about actively falling. You just gotta worry about matching the scrolling speed of the autoscroller, which is pretty fast compared to some of the other ones. Helps that you're also dealing with the slightly thinner vertical space on top of the horizontal space here, so it just feels a little faster than most. Honestly, probably the hardest part about this alternate route is grabbing the merit medal. Not that it's inherently too hard, it's just that I remember on my first playthrough I missed it because it blended into the background enough that I didn't notice it until it was already too late. Which, hey, that happens with a lot of collectibles like that across a lot of games, so it's not exactly an issue unique to that level. Before we move on back into Aerial Brigade, though, I'm going to go over here to the card chest, the King's Roost. I often don't use the cards I get here for some reason.
Old hag must have been wrong. King Birder isn't here. It probably isn't even real. How can anyone bag the Jouster's crown if they can't even find the Jouster's judges? Take this card, I'm done here.
So for that, we get King Birder's card. Slam cards at this point, they still have their use, but a lot of the other card variants are just more useful in the long run, such as switch cards, conveyor cards, things like that. Level 3 mystery cards, I think, have the highest amount in the game. So if you can get some from Chester pretty reliably, it's pretty good. Blade scales especially are ones I really like I brought up earlier in the LP. It's just a matter of what you get or what you feel comfortable with, really. The main exit route back in Aerial Brigade, though, is definitely the harder of the two because it's a large auto-scrolling segment where you have to bounce on a lot of the cannonballs. And it's not the worst, but specifically I do have an issue tracking onto the cannonballs when paired with the Propeller Knight ships going down below them. I don't know why, but something about that back and forth just kind of messes with my head and eyes, and I've died here several times because of that specifically. It's not hard in general, I just have always had a weird issue with it. In fact, I think I actively edited out some deaths here. We'll be able to tell by the upcoming treasure bags, I believe. Yeah. I think I died like 2 or 3 times here at most. We'll see at the ending totals as per usual, considering they actively total not only your gold collected, but gold lost and deaths on specific stages throughout the campaign. In that regard, because of the amount of stages, King Knight can probably have overall the highest death count of any of the characters, barring just intentionally dying, of course. I think I died upwards of like 4, 5, 6 times more on my first playthrough of this than any of the other campaigns. Potentially even in some combinations, now that I think about it. What I do tend to do at the very end of this stage, though, when there's basically no other platforms besides the cannonballs, is spam the bubble frog just to keep myself a little safe. If only because while the propeller rats are slowly approaching me in that case, I don't have to worry about messing up a jump at the last second. And because you can get the bubble frog so early, you might as well take advantage of it. Again, I really like this sub-weapon, if only because with King Knight's general difficulty curve, it's nice to have around in case the levels decide to get a little tricky at the very end. That gives us access not only to that treasure chest to the left, but also to our next Propeller Knight level. Ah, that looks a little familiar. And down here we got ourselves the money. Kind of a surprisingly small gold chest, actually, now that I look at it, but, well. Can actively leave back to the left, too, so let's see what we got over here. A Chester chest? True Love's Rose. 2 blocks up a rose. Must be meaningful to someone. I mean, I guess. But that was easy. It's also the rare time you have a treasure chest with an exit ring for some reason. I want to say at this point we've gotten enough merit medals for the next limerick with the bards. Let's go check that out before we move on to the next stage. Might as well, you know? Ah! Ah! We're under attack! This is serious. I know our foe all too well. The ship's on lockdown till we're rid of the enemy. Take out the intruders. I'll try to steer us out of this mess. Okay, so we got a little bit of a section that always kind of reminded me specifically of Mega Man 01 because of the raid that can happen in that game. There's a bunch of Propeller Knights raiding the Glide Wing, as well as the larger Propeller Knights that can just try to slam down on you while blowing you away like enemies from the original campaigns. Just now with the added effect they can slam down on you. I don't think you actively need to take out the rank and file here, but in the case you get merit medals or you want to buy something from your parents or the engineer, you need to go over to the left to do so. Our main objective lies with a certain familiar face on the other side of the ship where the helm is, because I think you can tell what this section actually is meant to be. It is worth killing the enemies on your first run just to get the money they drop, because the money they drop combined with the other thing that we're going to do here is, I think, meant to kind of make up for how lackluster the treasure hoard area where we got the rose was, because this doesn't happen until you get the rose, and even then, I think it's the first time you actively go to the Glide Wing after getting the rose, so you can even wait a little bit, and it will wait for you, I believe. You might just need to be on this chunk of the map, I think. Gee, I wonder who's behind door number 1. I know it, you scoundrel, you lout, you socialite! The sky isn't yours to own! Oh, my red-combed compatriot, how time passes! Tell me now, why did you steal my rose? Oh... And rather than take it yourself, you sent this well-manicured goon in your place? I hate to ruin such fine foes, but I've seen enough. On guard! Propeller Knight returns, and King Knight kind of does do well against his main attack, where he does the rapier strikes forward a couple times in a row. But once the cannonballs destroy the helm here, you are a little bit at odds with the platform placements on the jets as they slowly start falling and rising, though I do like that Cooper gets in one himself. I love that sprite of him so much. When Propeller Knight tries to actively suck you in with his propeller, it can be a little bit risky, because if you try to dash into him at that point, you might go right past him into the pit. I'd recommend, once you get to this phase, kind of rely more on the Rat Bombardier and its 2 hits that it can get, or other sub-weapons to do your damage instead, just so you don't have to worry about the bottomless pit below you, to a decent extent, at least. Worth noting, though, if you die in this section, you go back right to the Glide Wing itself, but you can just, again, head to the right and start the boss fight over again like I did. You know, I'm not sure if I ever actually mentioned this across my LPs, but I think Propeller Knight might be my favorite Order of No Quarter member design-wise. If it's not him, it's probably Spectre Knight. That's been a thing for a little bit with me, but I don't think I've ever actively stated that for some reason. At least I don't think so. I admittedly don't go out of my way to rewatch much of my older LPs of these campaigns before these, if only because I got a lot of things to do in my time, and rewatching it will only kind of impact that. Thank goodness you made it. We held her together best we could, Captain, but she took a beating. Propeller Knight could be back at any moment. We've got to keep an eye out. Got one open in my sleep. You'll be the first to know. Worth noting, for doing that, the Glide Wing actively does sustain damage that's present throughout the rest of the playthrough. Even if you upgrade the exterior again at Mr. Hat's shop, this damage never vanishes, and it's always gonna bum me out, I won't lie. So, here's the thing. He says Propeller Knight can show up at any moment. The moment you finish that cutscene, he's already sitting down at the table waiting for you to play him in Joustus, which I think that's kind of funny, honestly. Surprised to see me here? You should know I'm far too charming to be kept away for long. Oh, a glass of juice, my friend. To flight, to conquest, to Joustus. Now, due to the general pinwheel-like design of the icon, Propeller Knight's deck is very focused on Cascade-type cards. So an active advantage you can have here is either bringing a lot of Cascade cards in yourself, or bringing in technically weaker cards that you could then take advantage of by pushing another direction should you want to. With that said, you're also pretty limited in this specific game because there's actually only the 12 tiles and no graveyard tiles to speak of. So it's very easy to kind of lose track of where cards are going to get pushed to because you only have so many ways you can push them. Having a lot of cards that have holes vertically can both be a detriment and a helpful thing in that stage, depending on how it goes. With that out of the way, let's go check out the gold chest here at the Sealed Cellar before going into our next level. This is a pretty straightforward one. It's just the chest that's right there, and that's it. So the next level after this we're going to is the next Propeller Knight themed stage. And it's one that I like a lot, but I mess up a lot on for a very silly reason that I'll get into once we're there, but it allows me to actually talk about something because the enemy type in question is actually here. I just mentioned a few moments ago that I don't rewatch a lot of my LPs in preparation for a follow-up one like these in the case I need to, just for time reasons. But between the start of the LP and now, I have rewatched a couple of videos in every playthrough, if only because my partner was watching them, and I was like, what did I even talk about in some of those older videos out of curiosity? And one thing I know I said in the Spectre Torment playthrough is that this enemy type right here, King Knight had a pretty good way around, and as you can see right there, that's sort of true. Those enemies, their entire deal, like with the large ones we saw in the raid a moment ago, will try to push you backwards to the bottomless pits, and with a charge dash, King Knight can catch up to them pretty quickly, making them a non-threat. But in other playthroughs, they place them on thin platforms near bottomless pits. Most of the ones in this playthrough, in my memory, are over bottomless pits. So the entire thing is to try to push you down in a place where you can either fight or fight in neither in between. Largely, though, this level's mechanic is, well, ladders. You dash into them in midair and hopefully don't have that exact thing happen right there. Once you start climbing a ladder in this stage, they start moving along the track directly next to their propeller. And what they'll do for a lot of things in this level is actually place hazards along the path that you just need to climb the ladder up or down to avoid. Similar to one of the Exploratorium's alternate exits from earlier in the LP, though, you can just shoulder dash towards the nearest ladder and hold up to grab onto it pretty safely, unlike a certain Inti Creates platformer of sorts, where you need to press up the moment you're right in front of the ladder to grab onto it. Just holding up will actively hook you on. God, I love you, Blaster Master 02, but that section sucked. A big thing that I can describe this stage with is anxiety, but not because the platforming itself is inherently difficult, more for the fear of the rate of movement paired with your own. Just feels like it's more threatening than it actively is. It's one of those kind of situations. Thankfully, they even still do the thing from the Exploratorium stage here, where as long as you're on the ladder, if you shoulder dash to the right, you'll basically already be in the perfect place to grab onto the next ladder. Just be careful about spikes and bottomless pits in this, as usual with the Propeller Knights and anything like that. Worth noting, though, this level does have one thing I find very dickish about it, and it's the placement of the third merit medal. In that it kind of relies on a last-second, wait, no, go back type situation during the exit ring section. In a way, it's kind of similar to something they have only done really in one other level beforehand, and that was I forget if it was the first Troupple Pond themed level or the second one. The one where you could go past the exit ring to get some money from some treasure chests hidden in some walls and all that. When we approach the exit ring on the next screen, there is a window behind it you can walk through, similarly to some ones in the other versions of the Propeller Knight stages. But because the exit ring is literally right in front of it, you're probably going to actively miss it because you're looking more at the exit and wondering, wait, where did I miss the third one, though? And then as you're ascending the exit ring, you'll notice it and go, no! Gotta go above the exit ring, which the timing of this is also a little precise. Bubble Frog can help a little bit here, but a charge dash is my best method usually. And in the chest up there is the third one. I don't like this merit medal. It's not inherently difficult. I just think it's kind of dickish compared to a lot of the other ones in the campaign. But I guess at the same time, that's on me for not always having my eyes out. I guess in that regard, what is kind of weird about King Knight's campaign is that it is the only campaign of the 4 that actually has exits to the level. Largely, in the other campaigns, a level ends with a boss fight, but because not every level has a boss fight here, they needed to actually give them a way to end otherwise. And maybe just that slight difference, even this far into the campaign, just kind of trains me to not really worry about anything being beyond it, besides maybe some very brief money. I don't know, it's probably mostly on me at the end of the day is what I really mean. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 13, we're going to once again continue on here in Birder Bluffs, getting quickly even closer to our next Joustus Judge. See you guys then.